Call this meeting to order. Today is July the 20th, 2017. This is a special school board meeting to conduct some business. So at this time, I'd like to call on Ms. Zork to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ma'am. Next order of business is the adoption of the orders of the day. I need a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
I have a question.
Okay.
If I want to pull a consent agenda item, do I do that now?
You need to do it now.
Okay. I want to pull A for discussion. Do I have to be more specific?
It would be good if it was specific. Would that be okay with you?
Yes, I'll modify as soon as she gives me direction.
Sorry. So it would be A, and then item 6, instructional employment, I would like to bring up.
A, number 6?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I failed to ask that. Anybody else want any other items? Ms. Simchak, do you want to amend your
Yes, so
motion?
I'd like to withdraw my motion and modify it to,
I withdraw my second.
thank you. I make a motion to accept the orders of the day minus moving consent A, item 6 to action.
I second.
Okay. All right, now we have a motion to approve the orders of the day with the removal of consent A, moving it to action. Is that correct?
Yes.
Anything else? Okay, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, 5-0. Okay, the next item would be citizen input. I didn't get any items, so we'll move on to the next item, the consent agenda. I need a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign, 5-0. Next item would be the action agenda, and I think we will move to A6, the one that you moved, Mrs. Zork.
Okay. When I was reading through the recommendations for instructional employment Tuesday night, I was really concerned whenever I saw the first name on the line on that list. I need to say it. Okay. Ms. Decker, and this was my concern before we even got the email from one of the media. It just seems that based on what I know that had occurred at the school, that Ms. Decker oversaw, that this was a huge area of weakness. And it just really is perception that, and I know that it was a problem in the past, but it's the perception of just shuffling around employees. If they're not qualified at one place, then they'll remove them non-renewal and then just shuffle them around. So when I was looking through the job description, personally, I'm just going to voice my concern that I don't have any objection with us rehiring this person. It's just I don't see that this is the place that would be where I would want her to be. So I just wanted to voice my concerns tonight.
Superintendent, you want to respond to that at all, or?
The candidate in question applied for the job, meets all of the job requirements to get the position. She interviewed, she was selected by the committee, she's offered the position and accepted it. I actually think she has more than enough qualifications to perform in this capacity. I think we're lucky to have somebody with her level of experience willing to take on that position.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and as you said, it's all perception. I have a different perception. Personally, I disagreed with the removal of that person as a principal. I think that she's highly qualified and was subject to a campaign smear in the media. I feel she did a fine job at Gifford Middle School. She is a wonderfully qualified, a wonderful leader, and I think, as Dr. Rendell said, she's overqualified. She has taken a cut in pay, and she's suffered a lot in the community, and I really feel bad for the circumstances. So I support this employment, and personally, because we hire a leader to make those decisions in leadership, he would know far better. As my mother would say, every pot has a lid. And perhaps this is a better fit, but it comes at a cost, I think, to our children in that school and other schools. I think that she would have been a fine leader at a different school. But this is the opportunity that our superintendent sees fit. And I personally am sorry that we didn't have something, that would at least, that was a higher qualified, that would allow her to continue with her higher salary. But I trust our leader, and so I will support, as I supported, even though I didn't personally feel it was a good removal, I personally support Dr. Rendell's leadership decisions. Additionally, as the attorney will tell us and has in the past, on hiring somebody, if they meet the qualifications and they've been, and you would have to show legal just cause. So again, it's a perception.
Right.
It would not
Right.
fault you for your position, as I'm sure you wouldn't mind, but legally, we would have to find just cause why she is
And I
unhireable.
understand that. I do understand that we have to have just cause, but it doesn't prohibit me from voicing my concern.
Sure.
Because I do know that there was a long history of discipline problems that weren't addressed correctly, and when we look into how that went back, it went back to, a lot of times it was some of the ESE students, and so I know, based on meeting with teachers and understanding the school, that this is not her strength in this area. So I'm sure she's qualified, but whenever you put your qualifications to action, that's where the proof is, and I don't see that in this case. So I'm voicing my concern now. I know I have no legal authority on this, but I'm putting it out there right now.
Good. I just, but yeah, we all have our,
Right.
That's why we're on the board, to
Right.
express those issues. Anybody else have any input on that? I need a motion on A6 for approval.
Move approval.
Justice. Need a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
4-1.
4-1.
Okay, 4-1, okay. Do you have the cheat sheet too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Okay, now we need to go to the action agenda, approval of the 2017-18 proposed tentative budget and millage rates for the express purpose of advertising the budget in accordance with the truth and millage requirements. Dr. Rendell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's action item A tonight. We're actually asking your approval to advertise the budget for the public hearing on Tuesday. Mr. Morrison is going to go through a presentation with you. This would be, I think, our 7th or 8th? 5th at this point? Okay, 5th. Seems like the 7th or 8th. But our 5th presentation on the budget so far. All right, Mr. Morrison, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Rendell. Good evening to those in attendance, those watching over the internet. Before we get started, I just want to familiarize the school board members and the public who are watching to some of the attachments that are on the agenda. And just to run through them real quickly, I have the Florida Department of Revenue's form, which is called the DR 420S, which assists us in the calculation of the rollback rate in comparison to the current year's adopted or proposed millage rate. There's also a notice of proposed tax increase as a result of the calculations that are prescribed in the Florida Department of Education Revenue Manual, which because the proposed millage rate is about 1%, 1.1% higher than the actual rollback rate. There's also a notice of tax for school capital outlay that is required by TRIM in the backup. These are some documents that will be sent to the Press Journal and will appear in the newspaper over the weekend, again, pending your approval. There's a new section in the notice for school capital outlay that the Florida Department of Revenue has amended, which deals with the charter school capital outlay projects. And where the charter schools, we have been communicating with them, asking them for the categories of projects that they will be utilizing these funds for, as well as a budget summary that is included in there, which shows the detail of the funds: general fund, debt service, capital, special revenue, internal service, enterprise fund, which shows the projected estimated revenues and estimated expenditures. In addition to the backup, you will also find a screenshot, if you will, of an email where the Department of Education sent to us the actual millage rates that are required to be levied by the school board. We received this information on Tuesday, and we were able to do our calculations and be able to make the 1 week deadline for next week, Tuesday's meeting. Just a note here, Polk County also had to, in fact, delay their hearing as a result of not getting these numbers in time, but just my kudos to my staff for us to really getting this together and putting it out. Attached to that, you'll also find a Florida Department of Education memorandum from Commissioner Pam Stewart, and at the end of the very first paragraph, it does say that districts are required to levy the prior period funding adjustment millage in addition to the required local effort millage. As we always discuss in our workshops, that the required local effort millage is not set by this, by staff or the school board. It is required from the legislature to be levied. And then finally on that backup, you will see calculations from the Florida Department of Education with the prior period funding millage adjustments statewide and the required local effort. So for the benefit primarily of the board members who have not been through this process, we put together this PowerPoint presentation to show that on Tuesday at the public hearing, what you will see is the proposed 2017-18 millage as compared to the 2016-17 adopted millage. So the proposed millage for 2017-18 is 7.053 mils, which is 0.357 less than the prior year's adopted millage, or it's about 4.81% lower than the prior year's adopted millage rate. In comparison to the rollback rate, however, it is 0.078 mils higher than the rollback rate, hence our notice of proposed tax increase, whereby 2017-18, the proposed millage rate is about, as I mentioned, 1.1% higher than the rollback rate. We will also show the impact to the taxpayer on a residential home with a value of over $200,000. In 2016-17, this taxpayer would have paid $1,296.75. With the proposed millage rate with an assumption that there has been no increase in valuation, there would have been a tax decrease of $62.47 or 4.81% lower or less. However, based on the certification of the property appraiser, property values in Indian River County have increased about 7.66%. However, due to the Save Our Homes cap, which caps the assessment at 3%, the taxpayer, again, would have paid $1,296.75 in the prior year, and also this year would pay approximately $1,012.76.59 on that property, or still lower taxes by about $20.16, or 1.55% less, despite the property value going up over $6,000. Then, so we will get into the first trim hearing, which is a public hearing on the actual millage rates themselves, and then we'll ask the board, after closing that public hearing, to adopt a resolution authorizing the proposed millage rates. Secondly, according to law, we have to adopt the millage rates first, and then second, you have to adopt the budget after. And then we have in front of us a summary, if you will, of the proposed 2017-18 tentative budget, which is $8,288,535 less than the current year's current year's adopted budget. In the tentative budget, we have, by distribution this afternoon, you should have received all your tentative budget books in your box. And in addition, also with a memorandum from Dr. Rendell discussing 2 items that were added to the tentative budget since our last workshop. We were petitioned by the Sebastian River High School Marching Band for uniforms, and there's a very extensive rationale and quotation and information that's been added to that for your consideration. Again, tonight, all we're asking for is the approval to follow what the law already requires us to do. Any changes that you can make can be made on Tuesday and also prior to September the 11th as we refine our budget. The second item, again, in my memorandum, also details some set aside for salary increases for CWA, which is currently under negotiation, and some other non-bargaining groups. Just to run you real quick through the budget book, I hope everybody has their copy with them. I'll just take you through the budget book. On page 1 is a transmittal letter from the superintendent to the citizens of Indian River County, and it talks about the increase in the FEFP as compared to last year. 67% of our operating expenditures are basically for salaries, benefits, and employee costs. There are several notices on pages 4, 5, and 6 and 7, which are the actual notices that will appear in the newspaper, again, pending your approval this afternoon, to appear in the newspaper, which are the budget summary, the notice of proposed tax increase, and also the notice of tax for school capital outlay. Then we also have on pages 10 and 11, pages 10 shows the estimated tax assessed valuation based on the ad valorem estimating conference that was held in March of this year. On page 11, rather, you will see the same information that I just showed regarding the sample home tax bill, which shows a tax decrease this year on the average, which is what we expect most taxpayers to see on their tax assessment. Again, it depends upon the assessment. On page 14, a history of the FTE. Page 15 shows the regular legislative session conference with an increase of about $725,000. Then we get to the special session, House Bill 3A, which shows the increase on line 32 of about $2 million. And then the second calculation, which is also attached to your backup, which shows an increase of about $2.1 million in the FEFP, which is divided between the state and local assessments, local funding. From page 19 all the way through essentially page 99 are each school and department broken down by FTE history, by expenditures for 5 years, by project listed, and then a budget summary of it all on page 98 with respect to the tentative budget. On page 99, it shows the tentative fund balance that we, again, we have not closed the books for fiscal 2016-17 at this point. It is only tentative, but we are reporting a 10.75% unreserved fund balance. We have projected revenues of $149 million coming into the budget next year, projected appropriations of $165. About $7.5, almost $8 million of that has already been collected in the prior year from the millage. We're simply rolling forward those funds, which shows that sort of a deficit. With the drawdown, we are projecting at this point in the process, when you add the assigned and the unassigned on page 99 to about 4.34%, We do expect that to increase somewhat once we are able to place all of our teachers, get everybody settled for class size right around September, and finish the allocation process. On page 103 is the debt services fund we have discussed. We have the 2010, 2014, and the 2016 refunding COPS outstanding. At the bottom, on the ending restricting fund balance, we see an increase of $1,184,711. That is as a result of the sinking fund deposit that we're required to make with our forward delivery agreement with Deutsche Bank, which anticipates paying about $3 million in interest earnings to reduce the amount of capital that the district has to put out of hand for the principal and interest for the Q-skip. On page 107, at the top, property taxes, just to highlight that, because of the increase in the estimated tax assessed valuation, we're showing a $1.6 million increase in the property taxes, a slight decrease in PICO maintenance dollars. State charter capital outlay on line 4 goes down by about $216,000. So these are just some of the main highlights. In addition, on line 10, we have included in this year's budget, although not appropriated, about $1.1 million in impact fees. We made sure that we included that budget. However, impact fees are highly restricted. They can only be utilized when we are adding student stations as a result of growth. So they're not free and unrestricted dollars, but we do see some revenues as the property market has stabilized and people are starting to buy property again. On page 108, it describes basically some of the major planned projects for the 2017-18 school year. Just like to shine the light, if you will, on the item regarding 10 school buses. We have to also place that information in the trim ad up to, and the way that works is, although we say 10 school buses, it is up to a maximum of 10 school buses. If you cannot buy 11 or 12, that's your maximum that is allowed under the trim law. On page 109, it shows the project encumbrances and funds that have been budgeted and rolled forward into the new year. On page 110, at the very bottom, line 000, once again, it does show the charter school capital outlay dollars coming from the 1.5 mil levy, assuming that the board approves the maximum 1.5. That number, when you last saw it, was about 1.3 million. We had to adjust it up, as we discussed in our last budget meeting, from 1.3 to 1.4 because of the changes in the calculation of the district's capital outlay, FTE, and the increase in the taxable assessed valuation. On page 113, we describe in detail all of our federal grants. The lion's share of that $998,000 increase is through the IDEA, Individual with Disabilities Act, as well as our ESE Title I grants for next year. On page 117, we also showed the food services budget. The food services budget, again, we are expecting a drawdown in the fund balance, as we've discussed. The food service fund balance is measured by a federal regulation in terms of not having a certain amount of cash beyond, I believe it's 60 days. And so once you hit that threshold, you have to start drawing down that fund balance. So plans are in place to do that. On the insurance trust fund, on page 122, we're pleased to report that the tentative fund balance as of June 30th, 2017 is approximately $63,953 in a deficit, down from $3.815 million. And with the projected expenditures and revenues, we are currently still in negotiations with Florida Blue. We just have a few legal issues to work out. We hope to bring that forward to the board. We are expecting a 1.125 ending fund balance as of the end of 2018 on the insurance fund. So we've been able to turn that around. And finally, on the last page, page 124, is the extended day enterprise fund after school program. The net change in the fund balance is about $2,000, essentially immaterial. And finally, in the budget book, we have the budget calendar, which identifies the date, the time, and the place of the public hearings. One will be held next Tuesday on July 25th at 5:01 p.m., and the next one shall be on September 7th 2017 at 5:01 p.m. Those are the two that are required by law. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and with that, we ask your approval to advertise the budget in accordance with Florida Statute 200, the Truth in Millage Law.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Any questions?
I do. Go ahead.
You?
Go ahead.
This is my first time, so
Okay.
bear
Ask
with me
anything
here.
you want.
I'm not understanding, what time do the board members offer their suggestions of where they see that we can reduce cost?
Probably within the past 3 weeks or something like that.
Well, being that we are so rushed in our workshops,
You have the floor.
could I bring that the
Anything you
next,
want.
the next meeting? I would hope that.
now.
Too late.
Have to do it now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Right now.
Go for
all
it.
right, let's go for it. All right, so I have several items I want to discuss then.
Just tell us a page number so we can all be there.
Well, I'm not, I just got this book today, so,
Okay.
so,
Carter will help you get there.
okay. So I want to talk about our legal cost. I think Ms. Diagresta has done an amazing job. She is a walking encyclopedia. But when I look at other districts, they do have an in-house attorney, which reduces the cost significantly. And not only that, it's a benefit to have someone here full-time in-house. So I was hoping that we could entertain that idea of looking at bringing in-house, our own in-house attorney for the board, and hopefully by doing that, we would be able to reduce our cost. I am just, off the top of my head, I don't know what St. Lucie County pays for their attorney, but I was told somewhere between $160,000 plus benefits. And the last memo that I had from, I think it was October, I'm sorry, it was from March. So far, we've paid Ms. Diagresta $323,000. So, you know, I do see room for us to not only benefit from having an in-house attorney full-time, but also a way at reducing our costs. So I wanted to bring that to the board for discussion on that. And then also, if Dr. Rendell, from his experience in St. Lucie County, did you have an in-house attorney, or how was that? Can I
Sure,
ask?
you can ask, it's open. Yeah.
Sure. When I was in St. Lucie, we made the transition from having outside counsel for all services and then having an in-house counsel for certain services. There was still a school board attorney that was outside. You know, the in-house counsel usually does not handle the school board matters. And Ms. Diagresta is probably more familiar with these arrangements than I am, but you know, the board would have its attorney, and then there would be somebody assigned, hired to be in-house counsel that would handle a lot of these other legal matters. I think there's advantages and disadvantages to both of the models.
Okay, so did you, I see that a lot of times that our staff utilizes Ms. Diagresta, so I see probably a large cost of what we're seeing here might be from in-house, from the staff. Ms. Diagresta, can you comment on that?
Anytime a school board member or the superintendent or staff contact me, it's all under the lump sum retainer. It's not an additional cost. Anything beyond the retainer is when my firm is asked to handle a specific litigation matter on behalf of the board. And in the past, there are very few examples of that, but in the past, one of the examples is when the school board was involved in some litigation that unfortunately didn't get reported to the insurance carrier in a timely manner. And so we didn't have the benefit of the insurance coverage, and so my firm handled it on behalf of the board. So rarely, you know, do we get involved in litigation unless the school board asks us to handle a piece of litigation for you.
Okay. So I just think that this is something that maybe we can look at and see if it could be a cost savings coming up into, if you know, if it's not right now, I understand that, because it's just an idea that I feel like that we need to entertain. You know, I think she's doing a wonderful job, so it's not that. I'm just looking at how can we benefit and also have a cost savings to that too. So,
I think you're onto something there. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Justice?
I was going to say, that's great, and every new board member goes through that part where they, you know, because it's a large bill, that they should question it. I was in your seat, and the senior board member at that time, Matt McCain, turned and said, we went through this, and as just was clearly illustrated, you quoted an in-house attorney, but you don't have the out-house attorney, you know, out-of-house attorney to add the two funds together.
right.
So outside of attorney. But, and I too think the attorney's doing a good job, and I think in general, so that we can prove to the public that we do due diligence, and I know Ms. DeAgresta is not slighted by it, but I think, you know, just because we always did something, it doesn't hurt to review it. I could tell you we're not going to be able to get to it before this budget to do that, but I welcome that. But that's the first thing, and then the second thing that I recall Matt saying, I won't name the local attorney that he spoke about, but he said there's no way I could do it for what Ms. DeAgresta is doing it. So that was kind of my experience with that position, saying, look, this is a large amount, but we have, in fact, you know, we've had settlements from things that dragged on for 3 years. I had one when I first got on that dragged on for a few years, past my, you know, a lot of, so a lot of these things are litigations, you know, slip and falls and things like that. So that's that outside attorney, inside attorney hat. Ms. DeAgresta, for me, and a lot of us are out and about the day, ding-a-ling-a-ling, she is on the phone. I get her on the phone instantly more than not. But I know that it is due diligence to always look. I commend you for bringing it up, and as I did and as others do, and so it should get vetted and it should get explored. So I would say that I would support that. I tend to think that we're going to find exactly what Matt told me and what happened if you add all that together. The funds are going to be probably in excess considerably to what we're paying, but it's always worth shaking that tree. So I think it's a good idea after budget to look at that, and because there's no way we would be able to remove a, you know, gather all that information.
Right, exactly.
But I agree, that's one way, you know, that's, I'll just turn it over to the other inputs.
Ms. Justice?
Yes, sir. I think, you know, I don't have any issue with considering in-house counsel. I think also, you know, we issued an RFP for insurance rates. We got better insurance rates. So I think maybe it's just good business practice to maybe do that with our council in general. I don't know when the last time that's happened here in Indian River County, but it's something to consider.
John?
Thank you. And I agree with everything that's been said, and applaud Mrs. Zork for bringing this forward. In general, one of the things that Mrs. Simchek alluded to was that a lot of these aren't necessarily retainer costs, but because this board has been involved in a lot of litigation. So the more money we spend in courtrooms, the less we can spend in classrooms. And along that vein, I think that we should look at this. We should also, this board can control some of those costs. Some of those costs are controllable. In talking with school board members from around the state, this is something that's come up, and probably going to do a roundtable on it. But they have usually the superintendent or the district has an attorney if they do the in-house model. And then the board, if they have an in-house attorney, so you multiply that 160 times, you know, multiply it by 2, then that starts to get up right around there. So, and also I spoke with a district that recently transitioned from an outside consultant style of attorney that we have here to an in-house, and these board members were far less happy with the quality of service. So that's something to think about. This isn't Certainly, this board should look at its legal costs and contain those and be better fiscal stewards, I think, of the taxpayer dollars. And certainly opening up to RFP, workshopping this in the future, or
Exactly.
is certainly worth doing. So I applaud you for bringing this forward. And obviously, you've acknowledged this isn't something we're going to sort out tonight
Exactly.
or before this
Right,
budget
but-
is passed, but it's good to bring it up, and I appreciate you doing so.
We need to look at it.
So I wasn't for sure how we move that forward. Is it something that we as a board members
I would say-
research and bring forward, or?
Discussion item at one of the
Uh-huh.
meetings.
Okay. Because this is a lot of
Because
research.
they'll go from discussion to action, and then we'll give the superintendent directions on what we need to do or what we'd like to see, and he'll take care of that.
Okay. Well, I
Good point, though, Lauren. I'm glad you
appreciate
brought
that, and it's nothing, I think
That's business.
it's,
That's what we're supposed to do.
she's an amazing encyclopedia. I can't believe she sits over there and recites all the laws without having a computer, but she definitely is sharp. Okay. Another item that I feel that we should look at is, and this is on page 73. I was able to find that. In your budget book.
Thank you.
Are we there?
Yeah, go.
Okay.
Go.
I was looking down in staff summary, and I was noticing that this particular director actually has 2 secretaries. And when I was looking around the district, I don't know any director that has a secretary. And I really think this position is vacant now. I really feel that this is a position that we could eliminate because.
Can you tell me what line item you're looking at?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
It is,
Are you in the red book or are you in our budget book that we just got? 73. Which line item?
Right here,
Secretary for Transportation?
yes, Secretary
Fifth
of
one up from the bottom, I think,
Transportation.
yeah.
Thank you.
So currently we have 2, and then I had,
Mrs.
cool,
I may be able to clear that up for you, if I may be recognized.
Certainly go ahead.
I believe that the allocation as listed, one is actually a bookkeeper being used as the transportation bookkeeper position, and the other one is an actual secretary.
okay. Well, I have a list of staff that works in the office, so I want to share that with you so that you can see there are plenty of people there that can answer the phone. And I look at the fact that, our food service doesn't have a secretary. I mean, Mr. Morrison, can you name any directors that have their own personal secretary? Directors,
Directors, off the top of my head, I'm not recalling any at this point.
okay. I know some of our executive directors do have, and then we have several executive directors that share a secretary. So I just really think that this office with that position with it being vacant, I feel that that is an area that we could save 50, I'm not for sure the salary, but with benefits, I'm assuming it's probably around 50,000 that we could save. So that is a position I would like to see not filled and eliminated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Transportation Director is actually looking at reorganizing that department. She has brought several models forward, shifting different responsibilities around, reclassifying some job positions, and I think in the model that she's going to bring forward to us in the near future, that secretary position is actually eliminated.
Okay.
So it's something that, Mrs. Zork may see come to fruition sooner than later.
Okay, well, that's good.
Somebody else, yeah.
Well, I just got, so who would take all the calls from like parents and everything? What would that be? Or, if you have a payroll secretary, then who would actually be the customer service, we'll call it, if you want to call it a secretary?
Yeah, there's a couple other positions there that do man the phones on a regular basis. We're not going to eliminate the customer service part of transportation. It was something that we were highly criticized for several years ago, and I actually think Mrs. Eilet's done a great job of getting that back on par this year. We still have some room to grow, but customer service definitely has improved over there. So she does have some ideas to shift some responsibilities around, so that's probably coming forward pretty soon.
We just need to see her plan, and see what, or superintendent needs to see
Yep.
what her plan is, and, but it's a good point, Laura. Ms. Justice, you got anything?
No, sir. I will speak from a parent's perspective, that I've seen personally some improvements made in communication with parents. There have been several different issues that have come up as when you're running that many buses and transporting that many children will happen. But when I, as a parent, spoke with Ms. Idolette and asked a question about something, or I know other parents contacted transportation, there have been improvements made as far as notification and looking for ways to notify parents. So I've been very pleased with the improvements that I've seen, and I'm just, as a parent, it's been great.
Okay. Ms.
Well,
Short?
I know from this secretary position, I'm sorry, Sean,
No,
do
that's
you want to
okay.
go?
Ahead.
That, the secretary actually was taking out most all the duties anyway, so it's been proven that it's running, like you said, Mrs. Justice, very well without this position. So I just think that if we can cut in the areas that aren't in the classroom, this is definitely one of those areas that if we eliminate this position, hopefully we could have enough to bring in 2 teachers' assistants at some of our schools, you know.
John?
No, I was just pointing that this seems to be resolved. We have a reorg coming, and I've heard similar things that around different matters that there is to be some reorganization within there, and that position is to be eliminated. So sounds like we're
On the right
you're
track.
psychic.
Right track. Good question. Good
You're
question.
psychic.
Okay, in looking at the budget, it's very difficult for me to see, let me go here, page 110. We have very large amounts that really do not have very much description to them. So when I look in, kind of audit and look into some here and there, you know, that always brings up some questions that we really don't know what's in this budget. So I want to go to page 110.
Jen?
Well, the item I want to look at are portable leasing. Okay, so I have talked to Mr. Morrison about this line item of 600,000, and I'm not comfortable with the 600,000. I think it could be less.
What line item is it, Laura?
I'm sorry, it's 48.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you a copy of what I have, and if you just take one, I didn't have any paper clips. Okay, so it's my understanding where the 600,000 comes from is estimated leasing fees of 16 units for 200,000. Plus a reserve set aside for unseen portable needs for school choice and class size of 152,631. So that's 352,000. And then I'm told that we have to have an extra 200,000 for can you explain that, Mr. Morrison? Prepared for the.
I was looking for the chart that I had given to you. However, we have to reserve next year's portables this year, else we will be out of compliance with our leases. The $152,000 there is the anticipated. We do not know what the open enrollment law will do in terms of shifting around of students. So we did reserve some money in the budget for that prudently to make sure we're managing the budget properly.
How many portables would 152,000 cover?
Again, I'm looking for the chart. I don't have the chart in front of me. If you bear with me for a moment.
I'm sorry. So my question is our portable leases on a year-to-year?
Yes, we piggyback the state contract for mobile modular for portable leasing.
So where's the reserve from last year if we had to pay a year in advance?
So on that sheet that I gave to you, ma'am, it shows a roll forward of unspent dollars from the prior year. Again, I'm just going by memory, from the prior year that came into the budget for 2016-17. We were able to reduce that budget from 800,000 to 600,000 this year because we sent back several portables at Beachland, and I believe we also sent back some from Glendale. So with that, and we did discuss that on June 27 at the workshop, how we were able to reduce our portable leasing budget.
Right, and I understand that. It just does not make sense why we have to reserve 200, why we're paying 200 this year if you're saying that we have to pay it in a year in advance, or reserve it a year in advance. So it seems like we would have had those funds for this year from last year to pull from. It seems like we have 200 twice here, and we should have it once.
No, ma'am, I don't believe that is the case at all.
May I,
Sean.
Mr. Chair? Thank you. Just a couple points that may clear things up for folks here, and mostly for me. So we're setting aside 200,000, right? We aren't expending, this isn't sending a
That
check
is
to our
correct,
portable
sir.
leasing. Okay, so this is an allocation, this isn't an expenditure.
It's a budget.
Very good, it's a budget. And I will say that there are plenty of good reasons to set these money aside, and unlike a lot of districts who get caught with, unfunded, who get caught unfunded in times of distress. You know, I will say one thing about Mr. Morrison is he does set things aside. So let's say that if there were a scenario where there were a natural disaster somewhere and we had to bring in, let's say it's St. Lucie, and then suddenly we see this influx of family members and we see Glendale explode, population explode, that's one case in which we would have to expand overnight. So that's why we set these monies aside. Or if, let's say, one of these charter schools just shuts down and goes out of business overnight, then we have to absorb them somewhere. So these are cases that have happened, and I think setting monies aside is a good idea. I would, you know, this isn't a commitment to spend. This is a commitment to set aside, and it will come before this board again. And I just wanted to make certain that that was the case for everyone. It seems as though it is.
In which way are you saying it come before the board again?
When we spend. So this is just the allocation, this is the budget, this is creating the budget and saying we need to set, let's say, I don't know, $200,000 aside, and then he even goes, or this model, whoever created this, goes into greater detail in such that Wabasso, if we saw an influx, those are very, very regulated student slots, so making sure that we can meet capacity and student needs there is important, so having money set aside is essential. In the event that there are shifts in student population. So, this is sort of even a little bit of a forecast. But these aren't expenditures, and we will see this again. And I would certainly have the same concerns if we were spending these dollars today. But this is us setting aside monies in the event, you know, for very specific purposes.
But it's my understanding that it doesn't come before the board unless it's over 50,000.
Oh, it's always over 50,000. There are, I
Just
think
to
it's
set up-
76,000 just for
Budget.
Just the
setup.
setup cost and the
Right.
mobilization and all that.
For one
that does
portable.
require that.
Yes. To put in,
Is-
to put in electrical and if necessary, water and data is 76,000, I think we paid it at Wabasso. And that may have been an outlier, but
Well,
it will always appear before us.
I was just going to say, though, but with the statute and everything, all we need is a phone call from him, and I would not say, you can't do it. There was an emergency, and you can't bring that trailer in or that portable in. So most likely in that case, it won't be in front of the board in a meeting. It will be in an emergency phone call to a company that can bring that in, and we'll get a phone call from the superintendent. That would be my, on an emergency. Obviously, the unplanned shift of student population, it might make it to a meeting. But as, I think in the overall general, which I think that, because during the conversation, maybe people in the public might not understand, we're making a budget, and I'll give a simpler example. There's AEDs all around and very expensive batteries at $300 a battery and pads that don't expire. But if you expend those pads on, God forbid, a call to save someone, you have to buy new pads. But we have to budget for all that. And then the budget is very fluid, and so fluid, I cannot commend Mr. Morrison enough. So as he allocates for these emergencies, we have to have those there. So as the emergencies and life plans fail, thank goodness the allocations, that's why you always see transfers from one line to another, and we throughout the year have budget amendments, because now the allocations shift. And how he's juggling 20 balls at once, I don't know, but we always end up pretty good. Then at the back end, at the very end, if these funds are not spent, as you remember, our reserve is going down lower and lower, with maybe some anticipated issues that may come up in the future that will reduce them. So it will never go for naught. It will, but I think that as Mr. Frost started, the budget allocation is not an expenditure, and that's like an emergency item. So
Well, I wanted to use this as an example of, we have so many line items with subtotals, or with totals, over here. So when I look at this, even if we all agree the 200,000 plus the 200,000 plus the 152,000 for the set aside is okay, that still isn't coming to 600,000. So we're still lacking, accountability. I'm not finding the 50,000. And if every line item that we have here has funds that aren't really assigned to something, if we add all those up, how much accumulated funds is not accounted for? So I do have a concern for that.
Yes, ma'am.
I think, and I'm hoping Mr. Morrison do you understand what she's saying, that over here on page 110, you have 600,000.
Yes.
And then when you look at this description, where is the 600, you're not calling it out. So that's what the explanation she wants.
On page, if I'm understanding you correctly, on 2017-18, I've actually expanded the description to say that that's the new money. So on line 48, the portable leasing is the 600,000. That is the new money from the 17-18 levy. So I was trying to find the chart, which we had provided that information, but you said 200, 200, and 152. That's the lion's share of that 600,000, if I'm hearing that correctly.
And I think a lot of this is the result of the roll forward.
Correct. There's some roll forward funds in there, which I also detailed.
It was 26,000, I believe. So 25 here, 50 here. I just think that adds up, and it's not really assigned money. And I feel that when we're approving this budget, we should know, where this money is going. And this is just a spot check looking into these funds. I mean, I pulled the non-labor discretionary funds for 2 different departments, and there was areas of concern in here of spending, not having any accountability to the board on some of these. And I don't know, have you pulled the non-labor discretionary funds to actually take a look at what's inside these? Because these department heads and the directors, this doesn't come to the board. This is for their use. So I have concerns with not really knowing what's in the budget, because in these accounts that are 600,000, 750, I don't really know what's in these unless I ask. And it takes a long time once I do ask to get the information. And then, we really weren't given the opportunity. I know with the county, each department head or director comes in and they meet with the commissioners and they go over their budget. So when the commissioners get up there and approve the budget, they know exactly what's in that budget. We don't know what's in this budget unless we ask and we ask, but I don't feel like I know as a board member what's in this budget.
That's a good suggestion, Laura, and I think it might have been made earlier this year, and maybe the superintendent may want to move to that this next year. I think it's a great plan, obviously, to have each department head appear before the board, but it is the superintendent's budget. We have to approve it, but I think it would be very enlightening to see that each department head appear before us. Is that something we could look at?
Mr. Chair, we could certainly change the format in which we present the different drafts of the budget as we go forward through the budgeting process. That's not the model that's been used here in the past, but it doesn't mean it's not something we could do.
It's a very, very time-consuming thing, Laura, to have each one of them come in, but.
But isn't that our job?
Makes sense.
When I was hired by the taxpayers, it was to oversee the budget and make policy. I can't sit up here and say that I feel like I know everything in here and I can approve this the way that we're doing it this year. It's just not fair to the taxpayers. I think it's not fair to our kids, because I really feel that there's funds in here that we could actually be putting into the classroom. These non-labor discretionary funds, there is so much in these that, and probably every department head wants to keep as much as they can in there. So unless we actually address it, I don't see a lot of it being willingly given back to the general fund. So I just have a lot of concerns, and I would ask that my fellow board members ask for the non-labor discretionary funds, the details of that, because I just see things in there that just shouldn't probably be in there. For example, in transportation, I had...
What page?
Well, I had asked for this, and take one. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I believe this information was provided to the
Yeah.
board via email
Right.
last week, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so let's just go, and like I said, I was just auditing, I've just picked a few, but I just want to point out 3301, reimbursement mills, internal. So there's $7,700 in the budget, it seems like, that for internal mills. Now, I don't understand that. Why are we paying for mills for transportation?
So, if I may, when a field trip is undertaken and the driver goes out of county and they're eligible for the meal reimbursement, that is part of the cost that the field trip is based on, the meals, the mileage, the driver's time, etc. So that is the reimbursement through the field trip system that comes into that budget.
Can I just interject? Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll guess. Per diem
That's per
for
diem,
day
$6
is,
or
it's called per
something like
diem.
that.
It's like 6 for breakfast,
Right.
maybe 8 for lunch, and
That's their
maybe
per diem,
12
yes.
for dinner. And so let's say the class is going to Disney or Epcot.
Correct.
You have to pay the bus driver for his meal that he was not
Per diem.
allowed to take, because he had to sit by the bus and he had to be on call, things like that. And so I actually think there's a very low amount for the district and the amount of schools that we have. But overall, with your questions, and that's great, you have to be comfortable where you're at. And if all of us come with different expertise and levels and how to review, and also, compounded yearly experience with this budget, your first year, and you should ask all the questions, you should make all the calls. You should bring up in public what you feel you need to, or in private with a phone call, so that the public can hear. So that's what this vetting process is. But again, that's why I said this is the time to talk, and there's no wrong or right, or it's a process, and it's a transparency. And if you had that question, then someone out there did. So
Okay.
this is the time to do it.
All right, so I'm going on down to supplies, 13,473. That's a lot of money. I'm not really understanding why transportation would need that much for supplies. Non-capitalized furniture, fixtures, equipment, 1,041. Non-cap computer hardware, 6,945. Dues and fees, 1,700. Travel staff, 4,500. And these are discretionary funds, so it really concerns me that we're not given more of more details into this unless we really probe into this, and I asked for this, but, you know, it should have already been something that was given to us. I look also into fiscal plan. I see travel, 12,600. I think our district could do a lot better with their travel. We've spent a couple of $100,000 every year in travel. I feel like that's an area that we could reduce, is our overall travel within the district. And I'm not understanding, let's go back to transportation. I'm not understanding why fuel cost is mixed in with non-labor discretionary funds. I would prefer to see that separated out so that we have a more visual tally of how much fuel costs are within transportation, because I don't really like having that in the discretionary funds the way it is. It seems like every item I'm bringing up tonight is not really going anywhere, so I will bring back a couple of items during the year that we really need to look at, or when the item comes up for us to vote on the agenda.
Go ahead. I was going to use the term. I think, and I understand, it would be a lot of paper, or electronically might do, but behind every one of these line items is a justification. And I think what you're saying is you want to see all the justifications, which will make for, I mean, you think these books are meaty, will make for a big one, but that's fine. Or you could always ask if, you know, and I would say that's what I would have, you know, it's a suggestion. I'm just giving you the terminology. If I'm looking right at Mr. Morrison, he can understand what myself or another board member might say, could you give us the justification? I don't want to pick fuel, because fuel, you know, that's one you just can't, it's consumable. You know, you can't deny fuel, but like or something like supplies. You could say, could you give me the justification of supplies? Because supplies could be office supplies and pens, and you could say, you know, oh my goodness, that's a lot of money for pens, or what are your actual supplies? And that terminology is justification. And that is, you know, and it's each board's member comfortability, what line. Like, you know, I'm comfortable with gasoline, but I might have a question with Dr. Rendell and ask for the justification for other things. So asking for justification, it's not that it's not going anywhere, it's that asking for justifications is fine, and I think that, you know, any of the areas that you said you were going to bring forward, I'm just giving you, you know, please, if you're going to do that, and I would like you to do that, because I want everyone to be comfortable, ask for the justification, so that when we're looking at supplies and you're saying, what is this? That man has given us justifications behind it, and then we could then see the reality of it, and then either agree or disagree that it's, you know, an overspend, and we might, sometimes when you explore, you find it's an underspend, but I agree with you. In the future, when you have those areas, I would hope that Dr. Rendell is hearing what I would like to see, that if another board member is asking for something, you know, I don't want Mr. Morrison to not be prepared in public. So if you do bring it up, that's a heads up. Get all of us the justifications so we can follow along the bouncing ball.
Well, I think one thing next year that would help tremendously is, like I said, to meet with the department heads and have them prepared to go through their budget with us, and at that time, to be able to ask them to explain to us. I personally do not see why we can't do that. I think it would be bad. It would be more, I don't want Carter to get the information and then come back to us. I would just rather go straight to that department head to really understand why they're asking for what they're asking for. So that's my recommendation, definitely for next year.
Carter, when the Transportation Department presents their budget to you, is this the way that it comes? Or
No, sir.
it comes in detail, great detail?
That what you have in your hand is a
Summary.
printout from the system that is as a result of the zero-based budget process that we went through, and there are justifications for each line. So for example, the transportation The travel that you're looking at, the lion's share of that is actually ESE parental transportation, where we actually pay some of the parents to transport some of the students. That's perfectly legal by law. So we have all that justification. We can give that to you, not a problem.
So I guess what I'm hearing is if a board member wants to see those details, you have it. And all they have to do is ask you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to remind everyone, we did have each department in school go through the zero-based budgeting process with their discretionary funds. And so those justifications were provided to the supervisor who reviewed that department's budget. We can alter the process in the future so that there's more board involvement. That's not anything that we cannot do.
But I would think if you see items that you are concerned with, Ms. Zork, that you could go right to the Carter, and he could give you the details of it.
Well, let me give you the process that I normally have to go through.
Okay.
I have a meeting with Carter. I try to make one on Wednesdays. Lately, summer's kind of been a little crazy. So if it's written out, if it's printed out, we go over it, but if it's something specifically I asked for, I've been directed that during my budget meeting that I'm talking about the budget, I have to go to Dr. Rendell and ask if I can ask for that information, and then I have to wait a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to actually get that information. So it's very unproductive, especially when you want to really focus in on, if I was to say I want to focus in on this, it's going to take me 3 weeks to just get this information so I got this information, but by the time I've gotten it, I've not really had time to meet and go over this. So and these are only 2 or 3 different accounts. It should not be this difficult, is what I'm trying to say, especially if we're elected to approve the budget, and it's so difficult to get information and access what I really feel that I need to know. It shouldn't be that way.
Okay, you got any more items?
No.
Sean, while we're on the subject.
Thank you.
Break.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank Mrs. Zork for bringing that forward, and I would actually encourage you to keep going down that list, because we should at least kind of hit on those topics. I think that all board members should feel comfortable voting or not voting in support of a budget. And every member should be heard and have their items considered. So I would encourage you, if you're comfortable, not to quit and to keep going down that list. And while we're talking about these particular accounts, what would be helpful to me, and I've asked for this a couple different times in a couple different ways, but not necessarily like the basis and assumptions and justifications or things like that, but the budgeted, the actual expenditure, and the variance. Just 3 things. How much did we budget? How much did we spend? And what is the difference between those 2 lines? And if we spent $13,743 on supplies in transportation last year, and it comes back that it's about the same, I'm going to be far more comfortable in knowing that it's probably, I don't know, paper towels or something like that, and it's things that local leader has decided and vetted through another layer of leadership and vetted through another layer of leadership. And then if anyone did have a specific question about a particular line, why are we spending $13,000 on this, then I certainly think that having those folks available to school board members is a good idea. So that's something I would support. But again, I think that the reports that the board receives could be a little bit better and would offset a lot of that, I think. So I would hope you would continue down your list, but if you choose not to, I understand.
Can Carter Morrison respond? Oh, okay. Isn't some of that spelled out in the CAFA?
We provide the school board monthly financial statements on every single board meeting that shows all the revenues, all the expenditures, all the capital outlay, debt service for all the funds. We have discussed in a workshop the model from various counties that we've provided that information. However, at this time, we decide, I thought the consensus was, hey, because we are moving to a new focus system, a new system that would be able to give you that granular detail. We can run those same departmental budgets that you have, and we can provide them on a monthly basis. That's not an issue whatsoever. During the year, as part of the monthly financial statements that you get, if that's what the desire of the board is.
Did you look at these, Sean? Look like they're giving us the estimated and the actual.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I
not
think
on
the
these,
presentation, I think is good.
not on this
Yeah.
account though, or not on, but
Not-
that
not
could just be this
individual ones.
report.
Yeah, okay, okay. Any
I'm-
other?
I mean, this is, well, over here in our budget book, it's titled non-labor discretionary funds, and for example, this one's $868,130. That's what we're given over here.
Right.
So I had asked for a breakout of what's in that.
The sub-accounts.
Right. And so even the breakout, we have some accounts that 31,000, you know, a lot of money in these sub-accounts. And so even this is not really enough information, I don't think, for us to really look at to make a good decision on this budget.
It's like any,
It's blindly voting for this. We don't know what this is.
I think that,
It's not true.
yeah,
not true.
that's a bridge too far.
How's it not true?
Well, you know, I don't know your experience in reviewing budgets, and again, I think Mr. Frost made a very valid point as far as allocating based on history and, you know, I mean, even at this right here, it shows encumbered. You know, it's already pre-encumbered. I would have to ask probably through a PO, but, so he's shaking his head. So, like I said, our experience with budgets and yours might be different. You have to work your business and your experience, your questions and your answers to your comfortability. But you can't blankly say that we're blindly doing something because you don't know our investigative work or our experience or talents.
Well,
But you, as I said in the beginning, and encouraged, should ask those questions. And we even support you in asking maybe for justifications or monthlies. And if you cannot be comfortable with voting, that is, you know, each person has their own work ethic, conscience, and is responsible for themselves. So I just have to halt you with, we are blindly when it's you that is uncomfortable. And how you want to know my comfortability, you know, as I said, you know, you've run a business, so I have, you know, some of us have had million-dollar budgets and multi-budgets and have been in charge of this and understand account numbers and sub-account and object codes and understand those. And then when you come across a question, you can pick up the phone and have that call. So micromanaging is you know, something that a board member can do, but, you know, we hire one person and then he has sub-people and, you know, asking him, I've never had a problem with Dr. Rendell telling me I can't call Carter direct, though. And
have you tried asking for information directly?
I have, and I've gotten
Okay.
it very quickly.
Okay.
The
Well,
process should be.
It's not
each
easy
chief
for me. It
executive
might be that way for
Okay.
you. I'm telling you
Yeah.
that there's a wall put up with me asking
And all I wanted to
information.
say is, that's why I had to correct you with, I'm comfortable with all my questions, answers. I have some in private and some in public. As I said, my knowledge about per diem and things like that, my comfortability is different than yours, but I've been here 4 years. So I wouldn't I want that from a fellow board member, because boards are fluid. And if I leave, I want, you know, everybody does good work. You know, there's an assumption that we're all doing good work. So as we transition, I want you to be comfortable. So
Right.
I
Well, in
applaud
closing,
you
can
and
I
encourage
say
you.
that when I ask for information, it's sent out to the rest, and I appreciate that, because I want you to have that. So if you're saying you have information that you've asked for, I've not been given that information.
Well, I don't write an email, like I'll pick up the phone and say, hey, on this line item, or, you know, I have to ask you a question about the charter school, you know, capital outlay funds, you know what I'm saying, like that. So I'm not gonna make him write an email back to all of you. or, you know, I might call
Well,
Dr.
I don't make him write it, it just
No, I'm saying, but
happens.
if there's an email, I
Right.
think, I've seen you know, I've seen a lot of emails that says one board member, and that's policy, and that has been maybe shaky at times, not recently, but Dr. Rendell has corrected it, Carter, if one board member asks, usually happens when there's a new board members, if one board member asks, please reply all, because no one should have, you know, if somebody start writing or attaching charts. So that's all I'm saying, but I do want to say, you know, please don't speak for me.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
may I? While I completely respect your choice to ask questions in this manner, I would also echo Ms. Simchek's thoughts. Not all of us choose to ask questions in this way. You know, there's a lot of work that board members do that may not happen on this stage. And I think it's always good to remember that.
Very good.
So I don't understand. Are you trying to say that I don't meet with staff? I meet with staff continuously.
No, ma'am, I
Okay,
was not,
thank you.
This is
I
where the
was not
question needs to
questioning
go.
that. I was
That's perfect.
speaking for myself.
Okay.
Is that correct? I mean, it's open to any questions we have.
Of course.
Okay. But I just have one, Carter. On page 99, should we be concerned about the general operating fund excess deficiency of revenue over appropriations being $16,716,087?
Yes, sir. As I mentioned during my opening comments, is that the lion's share of that, almost $8 million of that, was already collected from the prior year in the millage funds. We simply rolled it forward and we're spending it now. So you don't have current year revenue to match current year expenditures. You've already collected that money.
Okay, just,
And in
you know,
addition,
when I see excess of expenses over revenue, I get a little concerned about that, Carter. Okay, very good. Are there any other, yes, ma'am?
It's because we had a motion and a second, I just want to make I don't have any more questions about the budget, but I did want to make a statement, and we do this quite often, and I think I do it every time because I just think it's really important. And Pam Stewart did include in her memo in the back of the book, you know, and thank you. If I pulled my pen out, then I can't. But on page, for an example, on page 155 and 158, Action A in the red book, if you look there on item 31, which is a rude awakening for if people are out there watching this at 5, whatever it is now, 6 something. The Holy Bible of tax revenue. We are obviously county number 31, Indian River County, and as you could see, in 15-16, it was .509, and it just keeps getting lower and lower. And now our assigned required local effort assigned and cannot be changed. Or if we change that, and that's, I always ask Mr. Morrison to recite, penalized by, you know, law or whatever, if we do not adopt the required local effort. So I really, you know, I always do this, and it's repetitive, but it's always a year later. So, Mr. Morrison, if you can explain to the public, because that was really something, an education coming as a city legislator and familiar with other legislative boards, such as the county commission, who can set the millage. I know legislator up here or any other place wants to raise taxes to afford the things that we can't afford, but the school board cannot raise the taxes. This number right here is set in the Holy Book. You turn to page county number 31, and that's where we are. And so if you could explain that, Mr. Morrison, to the public, how we are
Yes.
required to adopt that.
yes, ma'am. And you rightly pointed out that in the commissioner's memorandum, it says that you must adopt the prior period funding adjustment millage plus the required local effort millage. If you look on the notice of proposed tax increase, it talks about the $43,473,415 in state funds that you would forfeit your participation in the Florida Education Finance Program if you opted not to levy the required local effort.
And so I think that that's a very good point for not only the public, but the media to address as well, that is the, you know, even though it's the proposed tentative, and the budget is proposed, as you said, and things are moving parts on things, but the millage rate is almost set in stone like Moses' commandments. And I think that as a school board member, finding that out was quite shocking, and, you know, in the beginning. And I just don't know the public understands that those funds are set And if we all said we wanted to just buy and go and whatever, and we'll just raise that millage rate, we have no no people really want to do that, but what I'm saying, we can't say, well, you know what, everybody, you're gonna have to, we're proposing this because you're gonna have to bite the bullet because the storm came through and this happened. We can't do that.
Yes, sir, Sean.
Thank you. And thank you, Mrs. Simchek, for bringing that up again. It's always good information to share. The only thing that this board can adjust is the 1.5 mils for discretionary capital outlay, and historically, I think there were only 3 districts last year that went to the rollback rate. So that's why this is tax increase, because there is a modest increase based on increasing property value revenues. While this board is assumed to hold the rate the same as is in Mr. Morrison's presentation at 1.5 mils, it does result in a slight increase, well, an increase of $1.4 million in revenues, just as a result of the property values being increased. So that's why the top of this says notice of proposed tax increase, even though your local tax bill, the average person should see it go down. And a big part of that is because the legislature made a decision not to fund through required local effort, but through the base student allocation and a number of other mechanisms and categoricals. So that it is an increase of about $100 per pupil, and the property taxes are held the same or slightly reduced. So that's, you know, you think that this board can just sit up here and say we're going to fund the heck out of our schools and run up everyone's property tax bills. That is, as Mrs. Simchek pointed out, not at all possible. So a lot of this, I think about 85% of what we do comes out of Tallahassee. So the couple things we do, you're seeing on display tonight. So I just want to finish one thought. Before I forget, I just wanted to thank Mr. Morrison and his staff. I have had conversations with other school board members around the state, and they've asked why we had our meeting tonight, and I said because our staff got the job done with the last minute reports. Many of them have had to postpone their budget hearings because the late coming information. I just wanted to commend Mr. Morrison on getting this together and keeping us on schedule.
Question on that: How do you extend your deadline? I thought that was by statute.
Thank you. You would, well, Dr. Rendell could say,
but the way I want to keep Carter busy. But
you essentially just have to re-advertise and go through that entire process again.
I just wondered about the 501 exact time we have to have this thing. So, but anyway, when did you actually get the final numbers, Carter?
According to the memorandum, we received the email on Tuesday, July the 18th at about 10:30 in the morning, sir.
I knew it was awfully late, so that's another compliment there to you, Carter.
Yeah, I do have another, because I didn't see the pie, but I think it's also, and I don't want to quote 66% salaries, but out of your general operating,
67?
Is it 67? 173,960 and change, 67%, thank you, Ms. Justice, of that is salaries. So that's, and benefits, and the public should know that too. So just the quick math, that's going to only leave you 90,000, I mean 90 million.
34 cents on the dollar.
Excuse me?
34 cents on the dollar for everything else.
So those are just like little things that I think that because the budget is so, this is a very large budget, a lot of responsibility, and I think that it's important that those costs are just pointed out, that the fixed income and the 67% of the budget for salaries is a real important point I wanted to make to the public.
Any other discussion? I have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? 5-0. Okay, very good. All right. At this point, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, and we need to move over to have another special meeting here.